for the following. One, open a constructive discourse on these pertinent issues of peace building and justice, charting a path forward to achieve peace and full justice. And thirdly, harnessing the diaspora University. Ambassador Hammer grew up in Latin America, living in Honduras, El Salvador, Colombia, Venezuela, and Brazil. He is a native Spanish speaker and speaks French, Portuguese, and Icelandic. And Ambassador Mike and his wife, Margaret, have 3 children. And more importantly, related to today's meeting, Ambassador Mike played an instrumental role in the negotiations that led to the signing of the Pretoria Agreement that silenced the guns in Tigray. And I believe he will be shuttling between DC, Addis Ababa, and Mekelle to see the fruits of this Pretoria Agreement. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Ambassador. I will open the floor for you for your comments and remarks. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Mulugeta, and of course to this new group of Peace, Justice, and Tigray International. It's my pleasure to join you this morning from California, from Los Angeles, where I met with some Ethiopian diaspora just yesterday and participated in the Women's Empowerment event for the Horn of Africa. Good afternoon to my friends and colleagues on the East Coast, and of course, good evening to those joining us from Mekelle, including my good friend, President Getachew Reda. It is, as you pointed out, something very important in terms of my mandate to work on behalf of the U.S. government to ensure the full implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement that was reached in November of 2022. Time is passing, and yet we are dissatisfied with the progress so far that has been made in implementing the agreement, despite the fact that, of course, it did silence the guns, which was extremely significant, and that we have seen a rather substantial decrease in human rights abuses in Tigray. And for that, we appreciate all the efforts that are being made, both in Mekele and in Addis, to make sure that the peace endures and that there's a continuing commitment, again, to the full implementation of the agreement. Let me just touch on a few priority areas that we're working on, and again, reinforce that the U.S. government is fully determined to continue to work to try to bring peace, justice to all Ethiopians. I was in Addis earlier this week and had meetings there with government officials, and I was also in Addis in December when I had an opportunity to meet in person with President Getachew Reda in Addis. And of course, you know that I go to Mekele as often as I can, and that our new ambassador, Irvin Masinga, has also been there, and that our USAID team goes up on a regular basis and has meetings with the leadership of the interim regional administration to try to address some of the core key concerns, including issues relating to food assistance, medical assistance, other needs, and of course the implementation of the COHA. We would say that on one of the key issues that we've been pressing forward is in trying to ensure that there's progress in the DDR program, in the demobilization, disarmament, and reintegration, particularly focused on the reintegration part, as the interim regional administration has followed through on commitments on disarmament and demobilization. We are pleased that in the United States we have identified funding, and we are ready to support a program as soon as it is ready. And we've been frustrated that so far we don't have sufficient details. Although when I was in Addis earlier this week, I was told that Ambassador Deshome, who is working on this on behalf of the federal government, has provided us additional information. So I hope very much that soon we will be able to start contributing to the implementation of this program. It's an item of discussion that I covered quite thoroughly with President Getachew Reda back in December, and that is important for providing reassurance to all of Ethiopia that the peace will hold, and of course that elements of the peace dividend will eventually benefit the Tigrayan people. I will say that we were quite frustrated for several months that we had to suspend food aid deliveries. As you may have read in the press, it was unfortunate that the largest food aid diversion, perhaps in USAID's history, was occurring in Ethiopia. That required us to put a halt to food aid, and not something the United States wanted to do. But as you probably well understand, certainly the American taxpayers on this call understand, the State Department and USAID has a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that monies that are being put forward for assistance are used for its intent. And unfortunately, much of the food that was being distributed was not reaching those in need, but rather was being diverted either for business or were not in keeping with what was needed. We have now managed to reach an arrangement that is satisfactory. So food aid is starting to, again, be delivered. However, we understand and we have seen the comments by President Getachew Reda of great concern of possibilities of starvation. And so we will continue to work on that together with many other partners and donors. You probably are well aware that the United States is the largest donor of humanitarian assistance to Ethiopia. We're proud of that fact. Let me also say a word about our efforts to work towards justice and accountability. It is something that our team in Washington, together with our embassy, is working on to try to make sure that there is progress. You're all aware of Secretary Blinken's determination of atrocities committed during the Tigray conflict that he issued in March of last year, where he found, of course, several groups, whether it's the ENDF, Eritrean forces, some TDF, and of course, Amhara special forces, responsible in varying degrees for atrocities, gross violations of human rights, some of war crimes and crimes against humanity. So we will speak out when the facts call for it, and we definitely are determined to see accountability. We also continue to call on the complete withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigray, and are looking for the day when that can be fully realized. I want to emphasize that none of this, from our perspective, in terms of the engagements with the diaspora, would not be possible if it weren't for the heroic efforts of my colleague who's also on the call, Nora Dempsey, our senior advisor for diaspora engagement, which reflects the Biden administration's commitment to engage with Ethiopians and to hear from you, your perspectives, your policy recommendations, and to have exchanges like the one today. I have other commitments today, but she will be remaining on the call. And of course, you're always free to reach her and pass along your perspectives. Our policy is informed by the ideas that you share, and I have valued my frequent exchanges with the Tigrean diaspora, as well as with all the other Ethiopian diasporas that we find here in the United States. And rest assured, the United States is committed to trying to resolve some of the very difficult and complex issues that plague Ethiopia through dialogue, and that we have offered the federal government both to try to resolve the conflict in Oromia. And you may be aware that I spent several weeks last fall in Tanzania trying to negotiate a peace with the Oromo Liberation Army that unfortunately did not come to fruition yet, but we will continue our efforts. And that we are also interested in finding a way to promote a dialogue between the Amhara Fano and the federal government. Again, the United States is keen to advance the rights of all Ethiopians and to alleviate the suffering of all Ethiopians. And we will remain committed to that effort. There's not enough time today to get into other issues, but of course, I was at the IGAD summit in Entebbe, where a subject of discussion was also the recent memorandum of understanding between Ethiopia and Somaliland that is causing tensions between Ethiopia and Somalia. Again, we're urging all neighbors and countries in the Horn of Africa to focus on delivering for their people and to try to avoid additional conflict, which the region can ill afford. Again, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me this morning. I very much appreciate the invitation and look forward again to continue to have this dialogue and to my future visits in Mekelle. And I hope to visit even more of the beautiful areas in Tigray. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Michael Hammer, for the wonderful
Professor Mulgeta, let me mute everyone and unmute yourself. Sorry for a second. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you, Efren. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador. We are hopeful that your engagements would go through very well and lead into sustainable peace in Tigray, in Ethiopia, and in the whole region. As Tigrayan-born Americans, we are in support of all your efforts. So we are also here offering, as Tigrayan diaspora, that your engagements will be always supported by us. If you reach out to us, the same way we reach out to you. And I would like really to thank Ms. Nora Dempsey for making all these arrangements possible with us. Ms. Nora has been really a backbone in our Tigrayan diaspora, as well as probably other diaspora organizations in her engagement. So I would really like to thank her on behalf of my colleagues and the Tigrayan diaspora that's here today. Maybe I know that you are have engagements. You told us already before. So I wish you all the best in everything you do. Next is Mr. Getachew Reda, President of TIRA, or the Tigray Interim Regional Administration. I am going to invite him next. Let me share my screen very quickly.
What flavors would you like?
So we are on time. Our next guest would be President Getachew Reda. Sorry. As you know, Salam Getachew, welcome. Good to see you again. We are long time. I think we know each other from Addis Ababa University. I'm so glad that you are addressing us today as president of the Tigray people. Mr. Getachew Reda is current president of the Tigray Interim Regional Administration, and he is also an executive committee member of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. He has served in several capacities, both at the federal and regional levels in Ethiopia. He was advisor to the former president of the Tigray region and served as the Minister of Government Communication Affairs in the Prime Minister's Office of Ethiopia until 2016. He completed his undergraduate studies at Addis Ababa University's School of Law between 2001 and 2002, which makes us alumni. And he also completed a Master's of Law at Alabama University, Tuscaloosa, the United States. Before taking a government.
Unmute yourself again. I'm sorry. Please mute. Be disciplined, everyone. This is all mature.
Taking the government's position in 2009, he served as a professor of law at Mekelle University, located in the capital city of the Tigray region. As you know, he has done all, including sacrificing his life to peace, justice of the Tigray people. He played an instrumental role in the negotiations that led to the signing of the Pretoria Agreement that silenced the guns in Tigray. And currently, as you can see, he is shepherding, has shouldered that responsibility to take it to full effect. Thank you so much again, President Getachew. The floor is open for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mulgeda. Like you said, we know each other from way back when when we was in college. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you all. I see Mike has already left, but I should nonetheless recognize how critical a role. Oh, really?
He's here.
Okay. Yeah. Mike, in fact, has played a very significant role in making the Pretoria Agreement possible. He achieved that feat despite strong resistance. It was from the federal government, which was not particularly keen on the presence of foreign guarantors or advisors in our negotiations. But fortunately, due to his tireless efforts, he was able to pull off some progress. And I have to once again thank him for his tireless efforts. Like he has particularly mentioned earlier, we have been seeing each other for a long time now. Of course, he has been very instrumental in making sure that the process remains, despite the lackluster progress, especially with regard to the implementation of the most critical aspects of the Pretoria Arrangement, more particularly the return of IDPs and the restoration of constitutionally mandated territories of Tigray. I have every reason to believe that Mike will continue to be engaged, not only as a special envoy of the United States, but also more importantly, a friend of Ethiopia and a friend of Tigray. I know he has been complaining a lot. He has been complaining a lot about Tigrayans making too much noise, despite their small numbers, so to speak. Thank you once again, Mike. I missed out on the opportunity to see you last week, but definitely we'll not just cross paths, but we'll continue to work together and address some of the outstanding issues that we have here. And also greetings to all distinguished guests, presenters, participants, and brothers and sisters of the Tigrean diaspora. I would like to thank Professor Mulgeta, President of Pjti, and his colleagues for organizing this event, and of course for inviting me to share some of my thoughts with regard to the question of peace and justice in Tigray in particular, but in other parts of Ethiopia in general. Like my fellow Tigrayans in the diaspora and friends of Tigray, I am indeed delighted to be able to address our friends in the Tigray diaspora, our brothers and sisters in the Tigray diaspora, regarding their role in peace-building efforts currently underway and in the years to come. That the diaspora has been in the forefront of highlighting the cause of Tigray over the last 4 or so years. And that you've been tireless promoters of the cause of peace and justice for the people of Tigray cannot be overstated. You have been a source of hope for your people and indeed for all of us when the chips were down. We in the Tigray leadership, regrettably, have been missing in action when it comes to reaching out to the Tigrayan diaspora, particularly since the Pretoria Agreement, a failure which I have reason to believe has dearly cost us, diplomatically and in other aspects of our endeavors. But as people your side of the Atlantic would say, it is better to be late than never. Brothers and sisters, it's been well over 14 months now since Pretoria was signed, and despite the silencing of the guns in many parts of Tigray and progress in many areas, a lot remains to be done in the full implementation of the agreement. And the restoration, the return of million-plus IDPs, and the restoration of constitutionally mandated territories of Tigray, the demobilization and reintegration of tens of thousands of combatants, and sincere rehabilitation, recovery, and reconstruction efforts equal to the level of destruction wrought on Tigray are long overdue. The issue of deepening peace cannot be undertaken unless these priorities are fully and adequately taken care of. Of course, the issue of justice and accountability also comes front and center, without which the peace-building efforts will remain incomplete and elusive. I understand peace and justice could be a very difficult mix to manage unless we have a clear understanding of what it takes to build peace without compromising our commitment to justice and accountability. We know the federal government has been working on a transitional justice framework, also as part of the Pretoria Agreement. As Mike would recall, we've been engaging with the federal government on these issues, and of course with our partners, including the US government. Even when I was when I was in the US, in Washington, DC, last July, I had the opportunity to raise some of our concerns with regard to the transitional justice framework that the Ethiopian federal government has put in place. It is our contention, and it's also been our communication with the federal government that no matter how robust the transitional justice mechanism, the kinds of crimes committed in Tigray simply render such a framework, even if robust, woefully inadequate. A transitional justice mechanism cannot help address crimes committed by foreign forces in Tigray. Crimes by Eritrean forces are a case in point. Whatever robust process you put in place, the kinds of crimes, egregious crimes that have been committed by the Eritrean forces cannot be handled in any meaningful fashion unless we have some international component to justice and accountability in what has transpired in Tigray as a result of the genocidal adventure that claims the lives of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in Tigray. Equally important, the framework needs to ensure the fullest possible participation of Tigray in its formulation as well as implementation. A lot remains to be done in this regard, and it's entirely appropriate that the diaspora should push for introduction of an international component to the question of justice and accountability in this regard. A lot could and should be said in this regard, but it would suffice for me to say that there is a lot that the diaspora should and could do with regard to ensuring peace, justice, and accountability. Brothers and sisters, when I received Professor Mulgeta's invitation to address this forum, Mulgeta, as I have told you, I know him from my college days back in Addis Ababa. I was eager to use this opportunity to once again reconnect with the vibrant Tigrayan diaspora, with a noisy diaspora, to quote Mike, and friends of Tigray, and to share my thoughts on what our expectations are of our people all over the world. Our people are currently facing the specter of famine that could easily upend the rather difficult task of healing, peace building, and recovery and rehabilitation efforts in Tigray. Our existence as a people is still in jeopardy. Your role in saving your people from such challenge could not be overstated. Of course, you should continue to engage in sustained and coordinated advocacy work, building in the areas of peace, justice, and accountability. Economic support to your families, to your friends, to your communities goes without saying, could go a long way in alleviating problems of poverty at household levels. You could also play a key role in the areas of professional and capacity development in many areas that appear to be absolutely wanting, because Tigray, what the conflict in Tigray, what the genocidal campaign in Tigray has done is not just the destruction of infrastructure throughout the country, which is quite enormous, but the destruction of the sub-state structure itself. And one of the most critical challenges we continue to face is that we have to try and work towards bringing the entire state structure back on its feet again. And Tigray, which prides itself on having a 3,000 plus history, and which has been the bedrock of Ethiopian civilization, now suffers in a situation where even our state institutions and structure are absolutely wanting. And it requires a concerted effort on the part of not only the interim administration, but the entire population of Tigray, and more particularly the participation of our diaspora in making sure that our institutions are back on their feet again. Of course, last but not those of us in the government expect the Tigray diaspora to play a very constructive role, peace building efforts through community engagement with other like-minded groups and organizations. Whatever you do in your localities should not remain in your localities. Whatever you do in your respective communities should not remain in respective communities. To the extent that anything and everything that Tigray and the people of Tigray require needs engagement with other communities, I think you can continue to serve as bearers of that responsibility. And it is my hope and expectation that we'll be in a position to discharge responsibilities in a manner that would address the plight of our people. I can go on forever, but it would suffice for me here to say that the sky is the limit on your contributions to deepening peace and ensuring justice and accountability. You are our advocates and diplomats, wherever you are, and we cherish that more than anything else. Of course, we cherish that more than any other time in our history. Let me once again take this opportunity to thank the organizers of the event for giving me the chance to mend friends and reconnect with our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. Let's keep in touch and make sure not only to invite Mike, who was a reliable friend of the people of Tigray and the people of Ethiopia in general, not only to invite him and to give him a dress down on a number of issues, but also to pick his brain on what sorts of diaspora engagement. I know he's being assisted by Nora, who's been who has played a very supportive role throughout. And like you have rightly pointed out, you can count on our friends in the US government to make sure that whatever we do is done in a manner that protects the best interests of the people of Tigray. Once again, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all our friends for giving this opportunity to address long-lost friends and brothers and sisters. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. When I sent an invitation to President Getachew, and I asked him, how should I address you? Because in our college days, we used to call him Gecho. And he said, I didn't change, just call me Gecho. So that's why he started by saying Muller. That was also my name when you were in college. So good to see you, my friend. And really thank you so much for that remarkable address and remarks where you really gave us the roadmap of engagement for the diaspora. Ambassador Mike, like he said, I am one of the noisy diaspora. I tag you all the time on my tweets. But it is for a good cause. Thank you so much for all you do to help us go through this agony and have peace and justice at the end of the day. So I think we are on time. Hope President Getachew lingers a little bit more to hear some of the key presentations today. Our next program, I will pass it to Mr. Peter Hagos. Is Mr. Peter here? You can unmute him, Ephraim.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, there was for the technical problem. Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so the next phase is our we've already made opening remarks by Professor Mulugeta Gabriel here. We're going to go to the
Professor Mulugeta.
Professor Mulugeta will give us some additional opening remarks. Professor Mulugeta, the Vice Chair and for Academic Programs at Medical University of South Carolina and President of Peace and Justice of Tigray International, has done research on public health, global health, and war prevention in Tigray and other parts of the world. He is the recipient of the Victor Sedgwick and Barry Levy Award for Peace for his outstanding contributions for preventing war and promoting international peace by the American Public Health Association. He is fellow Hall of Fame of the American Statistical Association. He's founder of the leader of impactful humanitarian organization. More importantly, his father and husband. Professor Mulugeta, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Mr. Hagos. Hagos, you call him Hagos. So I am going to just, as I indicated in my opening remark, we have really speakers with diverse backgrounds, gender-wise, geography-wise, experience-wise, as well as in terms of expertise. And we will be addressing today issues of justice, both transitional and full justice and accountability, roles of the Pretoria Agreement and the suspension of ICRI, challenges and prospects in the Tigray Genocide Inquiry Commission, and also about harnessing the power of the diaspora in bringing peace and justice. So to give you some background, like it was stated in the bios, we have been really working on the issue of Tigray and even broadly, the Horn of Africa for a long time now. But things change over time. So as things shift, we have to also evolve and change our approach, our methods to dealing the prevailing issues. So Pjti or Pjti International was founded as a 501c3 registered in the US to harness the diverse expertise and experiences of the Tigray diaspora and Friends of Tigray to contribute towards sustainable peace through dialogue, implementation of the roadmap for justice and accountability, and we'll talk about that roadmap in our presentations, upholding territorial integrity of Tigray, return of the internally displaced peoples to their homes, resolution of the humanitarian crisis, full representation of Tigray at the federal government while agreeing also to constitutional arrangements, and strong influence of Tigray in regional and international agenda. Our really mission and vision is to see a peaceful, democratic, and prosperous Tigrayan society where justice and human rights are respected through multifaceted involvement of Tigrayans, both in Tigray and in the diaspora, as well as involving or partnering with friends of Tigray, like we are doing right now. There are 4 pillar goals in our portfolio. At least in the coming few years, we will be working on these 4 pillars. One is we will be advocating for peace and justice, and of course, respect of human rights for Tigrayans using local, national, and international platforms. We will work to advance peace-building efforts in Tigray and beyond to achieve our mission. And we will also be advancing initiatives to build free civil societies and towards building democratic institutions in Tigray and beyond. And more importantly, we will collaborate with local international organizations to harness their resources to achieve our mission, as President Getachew also addressed. This is also what we are doing today already. At the start, we are already doing some of these pillar goals. And in terms of objectives, we will support the documentation and dissemination of information on conditions of human rights and justice in Tigray and beyond. One of the institutions that we hope we collaborate with is speaking today. Organize trainings and workshops to civil societies on advocacy, peace building, and justice in Tigray and beyond. Support civic and civil societies as foundations of peace and justice in Tigray and beyond. And facilitate scholarship opportunities to emerging leaders with the potential to advance the culture of democracy in Tigray and beyond. And also to promote debate societies as foundations of peace and justice in Tigray and beyond. And finally, promote the role of youth and women in the advancement of peace and justice. I would like to thank so many people in helping us organizing this. Sarah Tadios, for who is an amazing planner and organizer. The experts groups, we call them the Tigray Digital Forces. They are amazing advocacy who have been helping us. And of course, my wife, Abby, who is my college sweetheart, and my 2 sons, and also my 2 cats, who have always read the JAMA article, as you can see with me on my desk. And of course, my colleagues of Pjti International and friends. I think with that, I end my presentation. Hagos, back to you.
Okay. Yeah. No, sorry for the technical back and forth. Our next speaker is Yamana Zarai Masfin, who is currently heading the Commission of Inquiry of Tigray Genocide, the Commissioner for Commission of the Inquiry of Tigray Genocide. Mr. Yamana Zarai Masfin is an associate, has served as an associate professor of political science at Mekelle University. He has also served at different positions of academic research, consultancy, community services, and administration, and administrative posts at Mekelle University for more than 20 years. Mr. Yamana, please, very welcome, and please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Unmute him, Efren.
Yaman Zarai. Okay. There you go. I did ask him to unmute himself.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, and good evening, good morning. Thank you, TJTI, for inviting me to present my views, and also distinguished guests. Thank you very much. My presentation will be on towards justice and accountability on efforts and challenges in the Tigray genocide investigation. Let me start my presentation by sharing you a very brief story on the Inine massacre. Inine, we call it Inine in Tigrinya, is found in Igala Warada district of Central Tigray, which is a very small rural village of about 345 residents, and it has lost its 62 civilian residents, which make 18% of its total population in a single day of October 23, 2022. That means before a month before the Pretoria Agreement, by a direct shooting of Eritrean soldiers who detained the victims for 2 days, taking the victims from their hideouts and homes. This is one of the thousands of investigations and thousands of massacres and atrocities committed in Tigray. Now, let me come to the major agenda, that is the challenge on truth finding and investigations in Tigray. And then I will try to share you some practical cases and some statistical figures that we have found as a commission, just to show the gravity of atrocities and the positions where the Tigray people is living. The first challenge is that no national and international media coverage is allowed officially on these issues of atrocities committed in Tigray. You all know that national media are not allowed to talk about it, and international media are not still allowed to enter Tigray officially. So that is one thing. The second one is no national and international independent investigation is allowed yet. UN ECRI, as we all know, and other international investigators are forbidden to investigate on the ground. The so-called joint investigation carried out in 2021 by Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and UN Human Rights Commission was totally hijacked by the Ethiopian government, and no independent local civil society or others are evolving on this issue. The third one is probably the challenge on the ground. You all know that there are so many areas which are not accessible to anybody who want to have a look at even from here. Western Tigray totally is in the shadow. Southern, northwestern, central, eastern Tigray districts and localities still are under occupation, and problems are still occurring and continuing. The genocidal acts are continuing. Security problems during the war was major challenge for any institution, including our commission, to work properly during the direct 2 years war. And we have logistical and capacity problems in every aspect. You all know that government structures were targeted by the perpetrators. So government structures from the top up to the locality is a victim by itself. So as its reflection, we as established by the government and every institution are also working in a very weak position. However, still, with the help of voluntary participation of the people, and also just striving efforts, we have tried to get as much evidence and document so many evidences as much as possible. That's and I will show you some statistical and evidences from that. What have we assessed? We have assessed more than 31,000 private and private firms. With regard to social institutions, we have assessed 969 self-help associations, 8 big mass associations, 149 religious sites, of which 195 are seriously damaged and investigated. With public sector or government institutions, 1,623 public schools, 934 public health facilities, 12 public infrastructure institutions, and 33 public administration of the Tigray government. On household finding, we have assessed 157 households or families with a profile of more than 2,458,000 people or family members. And we have also have more than 4,000 deep investigations in human atrocities and GBV cases. It is from this 4,000 investigations that I have shared you that little but very serious massacre in Nini. What have we found? At least on the household, we found that statistically analyzed one that I am presenting, 86.94% of household asset is severely damaged. That means more damage more than 75%. 80% of the household assets are intentionally looted, and so fully damaged houses constitute 31% of the assessed households. The assessed households, that means the more than 657,000 houses. 31% of them are fully damaged, and 49% are partially damaged by the war and its effect. Come to the household crop farming, 94% crop farm equipment are severely damaged, burned, or looted. 96% of crop farm inputs are damaged, looted, or burned. And if we see animal farm on the household level, 82% animal looted, slaughtered, or killed. 90% of animal feed is damaged, burned, or looted. More than 84% animal farm equipment is damaged, burned, or looted. More than 90% animal farm input is damaged. More than 89% animal medical service is damaged. Even Tigray is known by its honey production, and 70% of the bee colony is damaged. This is on the household level. To come to the sectoral area, we have assessed, as I told you, investments, public institutions, support sectors. On the agriculture sector, more than 70% of the agricultural firms that we have assessed report severe, medium and severe damage. More than 83% of the manufacturing sector have reported medium and severe damage. More than 85% of the service sector have reported medium and severe damage. And more than 91% of the trade sector have reported medium and severe damage. More than 67% of the financial sector, including banks, microfinance, insurance, and public finance supporting institutions, have reported 67.7% of medium and severe damage. And on the public health sector, more than 88% of the public health sector is damaged. And on the education sector, 78% of damage is reported. So more than 69% of Tigray heritage, even on the heritage side, heritage suffer different type of and levels of damage. So from this, we have analyzed that what microeconomic impacts can be seen, which has led the current status of the people, including the current famine to the people of Tigray. People with any damage type constitute more than 77% of the population. Displaced people due to the war within Tigray are 61% of the people. That means who stayed out of their house for an average of more than 100 days. That means in the different areas, especially in the attainments where the Ethiopian forces with their allies and foreign forces people were coming out of their house for different periods. So people were being displaced from place to place, from one locality to the other, from one district to the other, from one city to the other. So this has greatly affected production and life of the people. Displaced people due to the war to Sudan constitute 99,229 people. So poor people in the post-war area has been recorded to be 91.13% of the population. Before the war, poverty was about 29%, but now 91.13% of the population is considered to be in the poverty. So food insecure people constitute more than 82% of the population, and these figures can show you what has led the people of Tigray to its present situation. With regard to just some very few human rights issues, I will take the BBV findings, the gender-based violence. Tigray women were burned by chemicals and were killed during the assault, and gang raping were the most common and most frequent form of sexual violence reported. On the average, a survivor is raped by 4 perpetrators on the average. The maximum reported is 15 soldiers gang raped 1 survivor mother. Perpetrators were using different types of foreign objects other than their body parts to dehumanize, humiliate, and intentionally harm survivors' productive organs. They even have cut the vagina of survivors in some places. And in one general hospital, only in one hospital reported in southern Tigray, among the 510 rape cases reported to the hospital, from them, 18 people were tested HIV positive. 323 survivors have tested sexually transmitted diseases. 166 were forced for abortion, and 26 were forced to have a delivery. So we can see the impact of this GBV and other human rights violations on the people at every stage of the society. Now let's see the cost for justice and accountability and what way outcome we have. I think the international community, the Tigray government, the Ethiopian government have their own roles, and Ambassador Mike Hammer and His Excellency President Getachew Reda were mentioning. So implementation of the Koha or Pjti agreement is the first one which should be given emphasis for me to fully resuming constitutional order, which will allow the return of the millions of IDPs to their home. Humanitarian aid, healing and rehabilitation as part of justice should be taken very seriously. And this should be in line with further international investigation on the ground, which still is not done. Is the transitional justice a solution? Yes, it can be, but only for limited cases. As President Getachew has said, the Ethiopian federal government sponsored and dominated transitional justice one cannot be a solution for this problem because we have unimplemented preconditions of the Koha Pretoria Agreement, international nature of the atrocity, international actors, like Eritrean forces, which have committed in some areas the largest part of the atrocities. Initial trust and initial capacity, lack of capacity is there, and victim survivors as a center in local participation is a principle in the transitional justice, but it is not yet done. So we seriously expect the international community, the Ethiopian government and the Tigray government to work hard in bringing a very independent investigation which can support our findings. And the Tigray Diaspora Community, it is all said, as President Getachew said, continuing the all-sided campaigns and efforts on the cause of the Tigray genocide is the important ones that is responsible. As I have said, we still are working on difficult situations. We have technical, logistical, and professional capacity gaps, and I am sure on next similar sessions we'll have detailed presentation on this regard, because my team are also participating in this session. We'll have detailed requests on how we can collaborate with the diaspora and international community on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zarai, for the thank you. I'm sorry, Yamana, for the excellent presentation. It's obviously heart-wrenching what has happened in Tigray. It's painful, but the kind of documentation you are doing, the kind of information you're gathering, is I mean, every detail you are picking, it will be very important for the future, ensuring justice and for history as well. So thank you so much for the presentation. So now I go to our next guest presenter, Rita Kasai. Rita's background is in chemical engineering. She is
no, that is Christina.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, it's Christina. Okay, please, can you go ahead?
Okay, I will introduce her.
Okay.
It's gives me a great pleasure to speak to you all this here, to welcome most cordially at the official opening of the first inauguration. Welcome everybody again. So we still have a long way to go, and only through a joint effort will be able to reach our fundamental goals. Today, as you know, it's a peace building, transitional justice, full justice, Pretoria Agreement, and harnessing diaspora. So we will please welcome Christina, our lead peace advocacy team of HPN for Tigray. Christina, welcome. Welcome, Christina. If you tell me your Zoom name, I can unmute you. Is it Christina S?
Yes.
Okay, I just send you to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Christina. I'm one of the team leads for advocacy for the Health Professionals Network for Tigray. The Health Professionals Network for Tigray is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization made up of volunteer members, most of which are medical professionals, and we advocate to the national and international policymakers and institutions for solutions to the humanitarian crisis, access for humanitarian aid, and adequate access to Tigray, to healthcare in Tigray, which many to this day, as you guys know, do not have. HPN's mission is to provide humanitarian assistance and life-saving medical services to underserved populations in Tigray, help advance access to healthcare and medical training through institutional partnership, education, mentorship, and advocacy. Be the leading vessel for health professionals and institutions with mutual passions to improve healthcare and exchange expertise in Tigray and beyond. As a disclaimer, the information that I will be sharing with you is from reliable sources that is readily accessible to the public. The views expressed today regarding transitional justice are not representative of the organization. Today I was asked to speak on transitional justice and what it means as far as the ways that it has or has not been implemented in Tigray. Transitional justice is a process used to respond to human rights violations. It aims to provide recognition and reparations to the victims. There are 4 pillars used in implementing transitional justice: truth-seeking, prosecution, reparations, and institutional reforms. There are 2 measures that relate to transitional justice in Tigray. The first one is ICRI. ICRI is a resolution adopted on December 17th, 2021 by the Human Rights Council, in which they established independent investigations by designating 3 human rights experts to conduct investigations of violations and abuses of international human rights and humanitarian laws. such as extrajudicial killings, forced displacement, conflict-related sexual violence, mass massacres. They were also tasked with providing guidance on transitional justice. Specifically, they were required to include recommendations to the government of Ethiopia on ways to address accountability, reconciliation, and healing. The mandate was set for expiration and it was extended to October of 2023. In September of 2023, through the Health Professionals Network of Tigray and in collaboration with the Physicians for Human Rights, I spoke at the 54th regular session of the United Nations Human Rights Council. The purpose was to urge for the extension of the mandate rather than to discontinue it. Ultimately, the EU decided not to submit the draft motion, despite grave concerns from the commissioners and civil society organizations. Essentially, the EU and the US were more concerned with normalizing relationships with Ethiopia. Some of the concerns that were expressed are reflected in the most recent report from the commissioners that was released in October of 2023, in which the commissioners stated that conflict in Tigray has not ended, with Eritrean troops and Amhara militias engaging in ongoing violations. Another quote from the report, the Ethiopian government has failed to effectively investigate violations and has initiated a flawed transitional justice consultation process. With ICRI being disbanded at this point, as well as the African Commission on Human and People's Rights Inquiry into Tigray, there are no remaining international mechanisms for investigation to support justice and accountability. So while the investigations through ICRI were ongoing, as part of the ceasefire agreement, which was signed in November of 2022, also known as the Pretoria Agreement, the government of Ethiopia was required to put forward a transitional justice policy that would address accountability and give justice to victims. However, because the government of Ethiopia itself has been implicated in human rights violations, civil society organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty have expressed their serious doubts about the government of Ethiopia's plans for transitional justice. So now I'm going to go into transitional justice. What are the mechanisms or pillars that were supposed to be implemented? The first pillar is truth-seeking. Purpose of truth-seeking is to help victims find closure through revealing the details of human rights abuses they suffered in an official forum and through the establishment of truth commissions, whose purpose is to investigate what happened during the conflict and formalize their findings in an official report. Another method that is also used as part of truth-seeking is through memorials and museums to tell society what happened and promote healing through honoring lives of victims, recognizing survivors of conflict-related violence. In the case of Tigray, what we had as a mechanism of truth-seeking was independent investigations into human rights abuses, conflict-related sexual violence, forced displacement, extrajudicial executions through ICRI. Before we get into the investigations, it is important to clarify that the mandate or ICRI did not give commissioners the duty or allow them to oversee prosecution for crimes that they were investigating. However, it was vital to extend the mandate due to hindrance and pushback from the Ethiopian government, preventing the investigation team from getting access to and speaking to victims in villages and towns like Mariam Dangalat, Aksum, Ottawa, and Adigrat. The commissioners were essentially prevented from fully investigating accusations of conflict-related violence and the continued human rights violations that were occurring during the investigation in territories occupied by Eritrean forces, of which is reflected in the commissioners' reports. The second pillar is prosecution. Criminal prosecution aims to hold individuals who ordered, planned, or perpetrated crimes responsible for their actions through criminal sanctions, such as fines and/or terms of imprisonment. As there is no transitional justice system that has been implemented in Ethiopia to date that we know of, the information I'll be providing is based on the January of 2023 draft up of policy options for transitional justice that was used for potential stakeholders. In there, they recommended two options. One was to prosecute only those who ordered, planned, and instructed the commission of gross human rights violations. So this would include army or military leaders, individuals with leadership roles in the government. The second option was to prosecute those who committed human rights violations in any capacity. This would include those who committed extrajudicial killings, conflict-related sexual violence, arbitrary arrest, forced displacement, attacks based on race, religion, or ethnicity. However, the caveat that the
Christina, you have about 3 minutes to finish. If you can wrap it up in 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay, because I was instructed that it was 20 minutes. So, Dr. Mulugeta?
No, we have to be by 2015. We are going to move to the next one. If you can.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So then I'll go ahead and get into the reparations. The third pillar is the reparations. When we think of reparations, what do we think of? Economic or financial compensation for damages or harm that has been done to a person. But in the context of transitional justice, it goes beyond economic compensation. It includes physical rehabilitation for victims, particularly those who are victims of conflict-related sexual violence, providing them with psychological care, access to healthcare, access to education, access to social services, providing guarantees that the violations themselves will not happen again. But to date, there have been no reparation mechanisms implemented for conflict-related victims. And then the final and fourth pillar is institutional reforms. Reforms can be implemented in a variety of ways based on the needs for readdressability for victims, peace, and reconciliation. Legislative reforms are necessary to incorporate crimes against humanity into the criminal codes of Ethiopia. Reforms within the justice system to help address human rights violations, including vetting of judges who may have participated in human rights violations themselves. Structural reformation, creating oversight bodies within state institutions to ensure that they are accountable to victims, educating public officials, police, soldiers on applicable human rights laws and enforcing a no tolerance policy, addressing conflict-related sexual violence by ending impunity, including women in these high-level conversations, offering protection, safety net, and creating a monitoring reporting mechanism. And to finalize, I'll leave you with this quote: never think that war, no matter how necessary, nor how justified, is not a crime. Ernest Hemingway. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Mr. Peter Agus.
Okay, so thank you, Christina, for the excellent presentation. Thank you so much. So what do we have now? Do we? I think now we are into the discussion panel. So we have our panelists here. Of course, we have Dr. Patrick White. Do we have Dr. Patrick White?
Patrick, Patrick White, I cannot be.
He is in the podium, so just find it.
Okay.
Yeah, I found it.
Patrick White is an executive editor at Ethiopia Insight and a lecturer at Okanagan College in Kelowna, British Columbia. He holds a PhD in political science and international development from the University of Guelph, Canada. He spent 18 months in Ethiopia between 2014 and 2019 while researching the South Sudan peace process. Dr. White, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yes, thank you very much.
Welcome.
So, thank you everyone for organizing this very important panel. So the main thing I want to talk today about, again, is issues of transitional justice. So it's being addressed by other panelists in a very comprehensive way. Of course, I don't have time to go over all of the human rights abuses that have been committed in Tigray and throughout the war in Ethiopia, but we all know that they're comprehensive and in many ways constitute certainly war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, and when it comes to Tigray, I think there's a very strong argument to say that genocide was committed. So when it comes to the academic literature on transitional justice, we have two sort of broad approaches that are put forward. So the first one is what's called survivor's justice, and the second one is what's called criminal justice.
I'm sorry, Dr. White, sorry to interrupt you at the middle, but I also needed to introduce our another panelist, Rita Kasai, just while, if you can hold a minute,
Okay.
you can continue. Rita Kasai, her background is in chemical engineering. She is the co-author in Plain Sight, a book on CRSV in Tigray, and the executive director of Europe Anina. Over the past 3 years, she has focused on gathering testimonies from victims of atrocity, crimes, and presenting their plight on many platforms. Rita lived in the refugee camps in Sudan that housed over 70,000 Tigreans for a year and is now committed in Tigray, continuing the same work. Rita, please welcome, and excuse me for the omission. But again, welcome. So please continue, Dr. White. You can continue. Thank you.
So I think let's tell the audience that we plan to have 3 panelists. So one of them was Major General Abebe Jobe, but for personal situations that happened yesterday, he was not able to join us today. So both panelists would have actual extra time to discuss the issues. And the way we set it up this is they will first comment on the 2 keynote presentations we have heard, and that will be followed up by a few questions, prepared questions for them to address before we go to a Q&A session to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for the clarification. Please, Rita, welcome. Rita, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Shall I let Patrick continue?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Okay, Dr. White, please continue.
Patrick should continue.
Okay, yeah. So I had some remarks prepared about the transitional justice. I don't know if you want me to comment on the presentations first, but I had my some remarks just generally about the approaches to transitional justice. I don't know if you want me to continue.
Please go ahead.
Okay. So as I was saying, in the academic literature, we have 2 broad approaches. So we have this idea of survivor's justice and the idea of criminal justice. So survivor's justice essentially has the combination of impunity for atrocities along with also political reforms. So when we talk about, for instance, South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, this is the approach that was taken. And there's a number of scholars that have made arguments in favor of this approach, notably Mahmoud Mamdani. But there's also a number of criticisms of this. Obviously, all of the crimes that were committed during the apartheid era, during the TRC, essentially you had people admitting to the wrongs that were done, but then the slate was essentially wiped clean and all of the crimes done were never punished. So the second broad approach is the one that we've been talking about when it comes to Tigray, it's the idea of criminal justice. Obviously, when you're talking about implementing a peace deal and having criminal justice at the same time, there's some complications when you're trying to combine those 2 at the same time. You have the same people you're asking to form a transitional government. Also, you're also at the same time talking about prosecuting them. So in the case of Ethiopia, when it comes to the Pretoria Agreement, the idea has been that we're going to have a national system of transitional justice. And I think we're all aware of how problematic that is, because the idea that the Ethiopian government is going to be able to form credible transitional justice, and especially when it comes to criminal prosecutions that involve prosecuting its highest members and also its allies, I think is very unrealistic. We've seen the Ethiopian government shut down any attempts to try and investigate the crime. So when it comes, they were successful at petitioning the African Union to shut down its commission of inquiry. They were successful at subverting the first UN inquiry by having the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission be able to join on and subvert it in many ways. And then we had Pjti, which its mandate has ended recently, which was the most credible and important form of investigations. We also had Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, which detailed many of the atrocities, such as the ethnic cleansing in Tigray, but they were prevented from actually being able to access almost all of the sites in Tigray, and this is the same case for journalists. So when it comes to national forms of accountability, I think we're all rightfully skeptical that the Ethiopian government will be able to do that. Obviously, knowing the nature of Isaias Afwerki's government in Eritrea, there's absolutely no hope that he would ever even put forward any kind of show trials or sort of like even the facade of transitional justice. So as President Getachew Reda said, this brings us to the international. And so there's a number of avenues that can be pursued, but I think the only way you're ever going to have credible criminal justice when it comes to Tigray is if you have some form of international trials. There's a number of complications when it comes to that, though, specifically the fact that Ethiopia is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court, the ICC. So this is the main court that's charged with trying war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and crimes of aggression. And so given that Ethiopia is not a signatory to the ICC, all of the avenues are effectively blocked to having the ICC come in. But of course, we've seen that there's also the International Court of Justice, which could be another avenue. We've seen recently, just yesterday, there was the determination when it comes to Israel and its actions in Gaza. We've seen the Gambia bring forward a case when it comes to Myanmar and its genocide of the Rohingya minority. We've also seen an ICJ case when it comes to Russia's crime of aggression and atrocities in Ukraine. So we could say that the ICJ would be a much more, the avenues are a lot more realistic when it comes to having some form of ICJ case. Another avenue we could say would be, for instance, some sort of ad hoc tribunal. Of course, the ICC was created because it was supposed to supersede the idea of having ad hoc tribunals. So in the 1990s, you had ad hoc tribunals on Yugoslavia, on Rwanda. And so the reason the ICC was created was so that we don't need to always be forming these ad hoc tribunals. But given that we have this consensus-based order, if a country like Ethiopia doesn't sign on to the ICC, it makes it very hard to actually prosecute them. Of course, one avenue would be the UN Security Council bringing forward a case. We saw that when it comes to Sudan in 2005, when it came to Libya in 2011. Of course, getting consensus when it comes to the 5 veto powers on the UN Security Council is the big problem here. So we saw in Syria in 2014, we had China and Russia blocking them. I haven't seen any political will on the part of not only China and Russia when it comes to Ethiopia and Eritrea, but also when it comes to the United States, when it comes to France and Great Britain. We've seen consternation when it comes to defining what happened in Tigray as genocide. So they were very quick to accuse Russia of committing genocide in Ukraine and China when it comes to Xinjiang. And those are very serious human rights abuses that need to be taken seriously. But I would question why Tigray would not also qualify if those two cases do. So when it comes to the ICC, the UN Security Council could potentially refer the case, but again, we've seen a lot of consternation, or we haven't seen a political will on that front. So those are some of the main avenues when it comes to international prosecutions. Again, I would say it seems that the ICJ would be a good avenue. The other avenue that I forgot to mention would be through the African Union. So in South Sudan, there was a hybrid court that was supposed to be established. So the 2019 RARCISS peace deal, the AU and the government of South Sudan, the transitional government, were supposed to establish a hybrid court. But what we've seen is that because the AU did have the power to sort of override the government of South Sudan, but you're having the government led by Salva Kiir, who was responsible for a lot of the human rights abuses. One of his vice presidents was Riek Machar on the opposition, who was responsible for human rights abuses. So the idea that they're going to form, again, they're going to be tasked with forming the transitional government, but also tasked with forming this hybrid court that's meant to essentially prosecute themselves is somewhat unrealistic. And so you've seen the AU hasn't pushed, and also Salva Kiir has kept kicking the can further and further down the line. And you've seen the government of South Sudan be able to effectively prevent this hybrid court from ever actually being formed. So all that to say, there are avenues when it comes to international criminal prosecutions, but it's going to take political will on the part of actors like the African Union, or when it comes to, for instance, the UN Security Council, or bringing a case forward when it comes to the ICJ. And so far, we haven't seen a lot of or any action when it comes to that. My only hope is that they're giving time for the peace process to solidify, and that they're then going to pursue so more of a staggered process of peace and then justice. But the cynic in me thinks that actually what we're going to see is that they're never going to effectively do international criminal prosecutions. And I, of course, hope that I am mistaken in that assessment.
Thank you, Dr. White. Thank you for the excellent presentation, very informative. And I now move to Rita. Rita, the floor is yours.
Greetings, everyone, wherever you are. To start, by
a little bit of voice. Can you a bit louder?
Can you hear me? Yes, of course. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
So I start by thanking Professor Mulugeta and his team for organising such an important event, which I hope will be fruitful. I echo what has been said so far, and will try to touch on all the themes as much as I can. So first, on peace building. Peace is always welcome. However, the efforts to build peace in Tigray have so far been very premature, I think. They don't take into consideration the dire condition that our people are in. As most of us are aware, there's looming famine in Tigray, and there are still people suffering from starvation. As well as that, there are occupied areas across all of Tigray, Western Tigray, home to the majority of the refugees in Sudan, and the internally displaced people in Tigray is still completely occupied by Fano and Eritrean troops, leaving millions in a constant state of instability. Regions bordering Eritrea.
Excuse me, Rita. Can you make it louder a little bit, Rita? We can't hear you. Make it a little bit louder.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, better. Better. I know it is late on
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Perfect. It's okay, no problem. So yeah, regions bordering Eritrea are still occupied, where Eritrea has full administrative control over some areas. So 60% of Europe, for example, is still under occupation. And in these occupied areas, we have indigenous Europe children, grades 5 to 8, whose families and ancestors have fought for Ethiopia and have paid taxes to Ethiopia, who have never been Eritrean, going to school and being taught an Eritrean curriculum. These are 14-year-old children that are being told they will be taken to Sawa, the Eritrean military camp, to give indefinite national service for Eritrea. In Irob, again, we have a significant amount of enforced disappearances. Irob Anina has documented more than 60 individuals who had disappeared since April 2023, 6 months after the peace agreement. People whose families were disappeared in 1998 still have no answers and are going through another round of anguish. To give you an idea of the terror this causes, just 2 weeks ago, I was in rural Glomachada going to see my grandparents, and some of their goats made some noise in the middle of the night. And everyone woke up in absolute terror, expecting that this is their turn to be taken by Eritrean troops. We're still also receiving reports of sexual violence by Eritrean troops. All these factors mean that in occupied territories, there's still not an end to war, really. I don't want to move on from the peace building part without mentioning the refugees in Sudan, the people I lived with for a whole year who were stuck in another conflict, I was privileged enough to leave, but 70,000 of them are still completely forgotten, left without protection and essential services. So when we talk about peace building, we can't possibly be asking Tigrayans to shake hands and make peace with their neighbors and perpetrators when they're still living in terror, barely surviving. So that brings me on to the transitional justice. As a few of the speakers have said, the drafted transitional justice policy is literally the fox guarding the hen house. There are so many things wrong with it. As President Getachew mentioned, I think one of the most dangerous aspects of it is the fact that the most heinous atrocities were committed by the Eritrean army. I could probably go as far as to say that more than half of the population of Tigray were made victims by Eritrean troops. So in the context of Irob, where 72 people were massacred on and around Christmas Day, women were held in sexual slavery, and people were disappeared, these atrocity crimes were committed almost exclusively by Eritrean troops. The current policy doesn't include justice for these victims whatsoever. Since members of the UN Human Rights Council, including the US, were so adamant, the Independent Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia's mandate end without them having any access to actually fulfill their mandate. And since the responsibility has been given completely to the Ethiopian government to take over investigations in justice and accountability, and since the member states have turned a blind eye completely and took Ethiopia off the agenda, leaving it free to continue its atrocities on Tigray and across the country, we have to ask what remedies are there for these victims. Where were they considered when such harmful decisions were made? As Christina mentioned earlier. So for full justice, for the sake of upholding human rights and not perpetuating more violence, we need to recognize the failure of the UN Human Rights Council and the critical need for international independent involvement in justice and accountability. And I know Patrick just mentioned the difficulty in all of that. But despite all the difficulties, we never expected that ICRI would be something that would be able to do. But the diaspora mobilized and did a lot to advocate for ICRI to happen. And it happened. It's something that we achieved. So through, if we keep pushing, it's something that I think we will be able to attain international justice through the ICJ or the African Court and so on. One other thing that Patrick, I think, didn't mention in terms of international justice would be universal jurisdiction. If there were states that had some form of political will, and we mobilized properly as the diaspora to kind of trace the perpetrators, universal jurisdiction is something that we could potentially manage. As well as all this, it's really, really important that we make all our justice and justice convening as victim-centered as possible. So conversations like this, victims should be included. Unless the victims themselves are remedied, we cannot have meaningful justice as a collective, and peace will not be attainable. But before all of this, we desperately need to address the dire humanitarian situation by pushing the government of Ethiopia. And I also have to say the interim government of Tigray to fully implement the Pretoria Agreement. We desperately need to emphasize on the withdrawal of Eritrean forces to Tigray's pre-war borders, and to end. There has been obviously like a 15-month delay in executing the Pretoria Agreement, and that has left civilians in Tigray suffering and eroding faith in any peace efforts. So immediate action is really needed to prevent further atrocity, deaths, and famine. Peace will come in turn, I think. So I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita, for the excellent presentation. Thank you. And next, Professor, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ayahagos. We call him Ayahagos, by the way. His formal name is Peter Hagos Debra. So I think that the next part of this is really the discussion part, where we have some questions, not only to the two panelists, but also the presenters, both Mr. Imane Zarai and Christina. So all of them are co-hosts and they can unmute when they have a question, coming towards them. So as you can see, most of the questions, by the way, we are not giving any chances, so don't raise your hands. We are going to summarize because there are thousands of questions that came through the chat. We are going to summarize and present them, and just be patient to hear if your question was mentioned. The thing is, most of these questions were asked to either Ambassador Mike Hammer or to President Getachew. But there are some questions that were forwarded to Mr. Emmanuel from the Tigray Genocide Inquiry Commission. So I will first start by asking Yamane, thank you, by the way, for leaving information, your phone number, because I see that there are a lot of people asking the questions, and that you became accessible yourself to give more information by sharing your phone number. That is, the height of transparency, so we appreciate that. So they are asking you this basic question when I summarize it. Why is the Tigray Genocide Inquiry Commission not publishing its findings? Why are you not sharing the data with the diaspora so that we can really publish and help us advocate for the justice of our people? Yamane, you can unmute and maybe share your thoughts, and then I will go to the next question.
Okay, thank you. Actually, my team members are also attending this meeting, and we are saving the questions both for our mission specifically and also for President Getachew, because we have also to work on such issues, especially on the transitional justice area, and are very grateful for these high concerns. So I am not to try to answer all the things. As I have tried to say on my presentation, we are working on a very difficult situation in getting data. We were studying in two different sides. On the one hand, we decided to have our jobs be scientific and internationally with international accepted standards. On the other hand, we were working on a very closed and dark situation where we had no telephone, we had no internet, we had no budget, no transportation, and no electricity. So getting such huge data with such international standard was a very difficult one. So after bringing this data from each locality, getting there physically or bringing people physically from each community to our commission, and getting the proper professionals, proper equipment to even extract, clean, organize, and analyze was a very problematic one. The problem is that we were working for more than a year without any budget, any material. Even the computers that we had couldn't carry some of the data that we have struggled on getting and solving those problems. Just one thing, one instructor, professional from Makani University Business College said to me, I am poor technically actually on such data management. The damage assessment is damaging our computers, he claims, because we were just asking people to volunteer for to work hard for us. So that was one reason. Secondly, we have to also strive to go with even the political ups and downs, especially after the signing of Pretoria Agreement. We had no clarity on how to continue settings on how to continue this work as an institution, because many of my professionals working with me, with us, were volunteers, and they went to their life after everything was opened. So I have to reconnect. We have to reconnect again.
So for
So
the sake of
fine,
time,
but
Yaman,
now, just
for the sake of time,
okay.
hold
Yeah,
on.
okay.
For the sake of time, because we are not going to have a long time for this. So it is really more of a resource issue. I can attest to the fact that it was like maybe 7-8 months ago, we were approached by your office to help with actually reading the data, cleaning the data, and managing the data. So I can attest to that challenge that you have. And if any of our diaspora communities here have the time, the availability to help with resources like that, please do so. I have my friend and colleague, Dr. Kimfa Bishu here, and myself who are helping. So that resource issue, we have to help it. Let me go to the next question, Yamana. So one of the, I think, good questions that came that I will forward to both Rita and Patrick is these are interrelated in a way. Is transitional justice possible without a political transition in Ethiopia? Is one. I think Christina could have also addressed it, but maybe she is leaving because of other commitments. And also,
actually, she was trying to be readmitted. I think she might have been out. So
okay.
That was Rita.
The second question, if she is here, she can unmute and speak on that. The second related question to both Patrick, Christina, and Rita is: can we find a country like South Africa to sue both Ethiopia and Eritrea, like they did with Israel? Is the other question that came. If you can comment on those, I would appreciate it. Rita, let me start with you. Are you here?
she was trying to get it back.
Yeah. So Rita is, traveling actually far away in the Far East. So that may be the reason that she is having trouble. So let me go.
She's still here. She's still here. She's unmute now.
Until then, Patrick, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll try to address the second question. I mean, I would actually like insights from other panelists and people in the chat too, if they could think of a country that might be a good avenue. I know I'm Canadian, so I'll speak Canada. Throughout this entire thing, I've been more than disappointed with Canada. So Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, his supposed foreign policy is this idea of like a feminist foreign policy. But throughout the war, when the regional government has said something like 100,000 women in Tigray were sexually assaulted. Not only did Justin Trudeau not fully criticize what was happening, he would have supposedly friendly chats with Abiy Ahmed throughout the entire war and the atrocities committed. And actually, there was finally nearing at the end of the war, there was a parliamentary hearing in Canada, and they heard all of the victims' testimonies. And I've heard that supposedly there was many people within the cabinet and members of parliament who were convinced that what happened in Tigray was genocide, but they were told not to use the word. So again, this politicization of the word genocide, because if you use it, then you have to act. So I mentioned before how in a case like when it's Russia or China and they're enemy states of Western powers, it's very easy to say they're committing genocide, because then you actually have license to impose sanctions. When it comes to Rwanda in 1994 or Ethiopia in the last few years, then you're actually obliged to act in situations where they don't want to. And so Canada has its mining companies have economic interests in Tigray. When it comes to the US, at least you saw some criticism and you saw some actions like the AGOA, like kicking Ethiopia its AGOA status away. but now you've seen a return. And so again, my cynical view is that you're seeing economic interests and security interests in the region overriding the ability to pursue criminal justice. So I bring all this up because I would say like a country like Canada that historically has championed itself as like one of the founders of peacekeeping and human rights and all these things, which if you actually look into the record, it's obviously there's a lot of hypocrisy in Canada's real record, same with the United States. And so you'd think a country like Canada might be a good avenue, but I would actually say it's not. So
thank you, Patrick.
Yeah. I don't know which country would be a good avenue, but I would like ideas from others. But Western powers, I'm pretty cynical about whether they would actually.
Let me go to Rita. Rita is back. So Rita, did you hear the questions?
Yes, I think so. So the first one on
go ahead.
Can there be transitional justice if there is no transition in the government? I think there's, as Patrick said, there's victim justice. So when we come to the victims, and all the victims that at least I have interviewed from Tigray have been adamant that justice should not be led by the current government. Because as I said earlier, it is like the fox guarding the hen house. So I would say no, transitional justice should not be done by this government. And then on the second question of which country, I think Ireland has shown quite a lot of principle when it came to human rights. Not just in our context, but like even in the context of Gaza and things like that. I think in Ethiopia, it was the only diplomatic community that was kicked out during the genocidal war on Tigray. So that could be a significant, like it could be a good try, worth a good try. But again, all the countries want to normalize their relationships with Ethiopia, so it will require a lot of effort.
Is Christina back or no? I think she left. She texted me.
Professor, I have a couple of points, if I may.
So we are running short on time. Just do it in 1 minute, Hagos.
Okay. Yes, I have one question to Yamana, and that is, are you part of the interim regional government? And in that sense, are you officially part of the government agency? And how do you balance your work with the federal government? That's one. And the other that was it is, how would you like the diaspora? How would you like to engage the diaspora? You said you have resource constraints and do that. Do you have kind of areas you would say these are the areas we would like the diaspora support? And for Dr. White, my question would be, you said ad hoc tribunal would be the right thing for Tigray. How can we achieve that? Thank you.
So you got to briefly answer them because we are running short of time. I will start with Yamana. You got 2 minutes, Yamana. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
He is here from Tigray, and it's probably past midnight. We appreciate your dedication, but we have to wrap up on time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We are government established a commission. So now the government has fully recognized us, and though limited, we are budgeted for the last few months, and we are working as part of the government. But we tried to make our works independent by the standards that we put, standards, internationally accepted standards, and professionalism, not by the initialization. That is one. We don't have any direct relation with the federal government. So just we are working in Tigray, though we still are also collecting data from Tagarus outside of Tigray, like different regions of Tigray. On the support, I think we have to make it a more detailed one for next time, because we have to be systematic. We were just focusing on finishing the data that we have at hand, and also some gap filling assessments. We have finished data quality just last week from 728 areas or areas. So next time we'll come to you with clear demands on how we can be actively supported. Thank you.
Thank you, Yamana. And Patrick?
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So when it comes to the ad hoc tribunals, actually, I think I would actually say probably the ICJ is the best route. Like you said, finding the right country would be the thing. So when it comes to the AU or the UNSC referring the case to the ICC, in theory, those would be the best approaches, but politics are governing that that's not going to happen. When it comes to the ad hoc tribunals, like for Rwanda and Yugoslavia, those were very effective, but those were before the Rome Statute in 1998, so before the ICC was formed. And so the ICC was supposed to sort of supersede the need for an ad hoc tribunal. So you haven't seen really since the ICC was formed that you've had these ad hoc tribunals. But the problem being, of course, as I said before, the ICC being this consensus-based mechanism, the only avenues are either that you have a state party that is referring itself somehow, or you have to be a state party to the ICC to be referred, or you have the UN Security Council referring you, and so far we've seen no political will on the part of the UN Security Council. So given all of that, and again, seeing no political will on the part of the African Union, I would say finding some country like South Africa when it comes to Gaza, or the Gambia when it comes to Myanmar to bring forward a case would seem to me to be the most effective avenue.
Thank you, Patrick. Rita, do you have anything to add to that? Quickly, 1 minute. Okay, maybe Rita is having an unmuting problem. So as we move along our program, I think before that, I would like to shout out really to our long time, Tigray friend, Gail Warden has been here with us for a while. Thank you so much for joining us, Gail, Miss Gail Warden. And also my dear friend who has been really, the backbone of my work with the American Public Health Association in conferences and all, Evie Chirov is also here. Evie, can we see your picture? She has been really, really an amazing supporter of our work, writing, documenting policies, and reviewing anything that I do about Tigray. And her heart is in Tigray, really. Yesterday when I wrote to her, she said, I wish I go with you to Tigray and do something. But she had surgery at some point, so she has limitations in her movements. But thank you so much to see you here, Evie. She is a dear friend. And also shout out to everyone from Tigray who joined us. I mean, it's very late in Tigray, as you know, and taking your time, taking your Saturday from family time to join us for this very, very important conversation is really, we are very grateful. And this as we say, this is the first, and you will see us coming back with similar, more, I think, provocative and more organized programs, workshops, and seminars, as we indicated in our goals as well as our objectives. Now, I think the last important thing, one of our founding members, Archpriest Muse Berhan, is he our co-host, Ephraim?
Yes, he is a co-host.
He will be making some closing remarks. Are you ready, Lika Kahanat?
I am.
You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to do some remarks, closing remarks. And also, I would like to thank...
Lika Kahanat, can you wait 1 second? Sorry. We need to introduce you. So, Archpriest Muse Berhan has been really also part of our advocacy efforts for so many years that since I knew him, but more importantly, the last 3 years, we have been working together. He has a lot of connections with policymakers, but he is a father, and he has been to Tigray and was there for 2 months supporting what is going on with the humanitarian crisis with people suffering from PTSD, and doing healing services for the veterans of Tigray. So he is also a treasurer, although we don't have money yet. He is our treasury of the Pjti International. So I just wanted to say that first, Mose. Go ahead now.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction, Professor Mulugeta, our president, and thank you for your tireless work for making this event possible. You worked day and night, and you made it. And thank you for all those President Getachew, Ambassador Mike Hammer, and colleagues and presenters, panelists, medias, attendees. We cannot have any leverage without you. And thank you so much for making it a day of mission and message. We are talking here about the obstacles of peace and justice. I can say and hope the greater obstacles will be the greater potential outcome for Tigray. We should feel not shy to work with the religious leaders for peace and justice, because we can't find the location of peace and justice closer to the house of God than anywhere else. Who and what are we? Did you ever stop to question? What is our basic makeup? What is our substance? What essential elements are we made of? The answer is, we are the likeness of God. We are part of God. We are the image of God. We are the word and flesh of God. Let us check what the prophet Amos said about peace and justice, and how he revitalized and realized peace and justice. Amos 5:24. Let justice run down like water, the righteousness like a mighty stream. It is easy to separate our religious ceremonies from the way we treat others, and to take what God should be happy if we give him his due without regard to justice and righteousness toward others. God won't have it. When we are talking about peace and justice, they are woven into the very fabric of our life. Therefore, we talk about peace and cannot divorce justice from peace. And justice is a tenet of the substantial and sustainability of peace. Micah 6:8 tells us that first, what essential required of us to do. 3 points: act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. The Lord answered the contentious witness in open court. What requires of us isn't complicated. He has shown us in Micah 6:8, the prophets imagine a courtroom. God stopped the shouting of the angry defendant from the witness box. God essentially said, you act as if what I require of you in some mystery. In fact, it is not mystery at all. He's shown us clearly what is good to make peace and to be at peace is to act justly. So God is not only God of peace, but he is also a God of justice for his image bearer. Justice cannot be done miraculously. It requires a formula of action. In our duty, we simply need to do these 3 things: act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God. He wants us to remember who he is. He's our creator. He's our God. If we keep that in mind, we will walk humbly before him. We will make peace and live in justice. We are not talking here about condensing simple matters, but we are talking about peace and to give justice for God's image bearer. If of men and women in our generation. In the Giz language, in our Orthodox daily prayer, it said, اسمحالوت بزتهاتيات بهيت بزت سجا እግዚአብሔር. In roughly translation to the greater the problem requires a greater solution and outcome is greater and brighter. When we translate this into Tigray's measureless genocide events, not only justice needs to be served, as our God asked us to act justly. I think our God would want us to work for the greater cause of Tigray so that the same events will never, ever occur again. What would be the fate of Tigray after this genocide? Justice is not only compensation for the victims by the genociders, criminals, for the current generation, but it should give us the wisdom and knowledge not to wait for another cycle. We are racing against time. Time is the distance between cause and effect. Time is the separation between action and reaction. Time is the space between activity and repercussion, like the divide between crime and consequences. So Tigreans and friends of Tigrayans, we have no time to waste when our citizens are perishing every day by double genocide and lamenting on the street of Tigray. Overall, whether we believe in God or not, we all need to carry with us that we are entitled to be the anchor of peace and justice. The Creator God is the God of justice. The Creator God who created all humans in his likeness is the God of peace and justice. The Creator God who labored to make men and women in his image to continue multiplying in this universe is the God of peace and justice. The Creator God is the God of freedom for all, including Tigreans and Tigray. Therefore, Tigray is longing for peace, justice, and freedom. With the blessing of God, with the help of yours, eventually God will allow Tigray to prevail and bring freedom home, delivering the painful justice and freedom at last. May God bless you and thank you and take the message, act on it, and help the people of Tigray and surrounding. Thank you.
Thank you for that very, very important closing message, Archpriest Muse Bahar, Wajike Khanat Muse, Anilna. We thank you very much. So I think we are concluding on time. Like we said, we will start at 1 and we will end at 3:05. It is 3:04. So the last message we would like to pass as you go home is, so we are Pjti International, Peace and Justice for Tigreans International. We are a 501c3. If you would like really to join in our mission to one, as individuals, you can join us. You can partner with us if you are organizations. Here are really the things we are trying to accomplish in the coming short months. They are very defined, and it's only about our mission. So we are really, everything we do, we know it needs to harness, the multifaceted expertise and experiences of the diaspora. So we really want you to call us, to reach us out. We are on Twitter, Pjti Inter is our handle. We have an email, pjtinternational@gmail.com. So actually, pjtint23@gmail.com. So these are ways for you to connect with us, to join us. As you can see, this is not a by name only international conference. Even though it's our first conference, it's a truly international conference where it brought people from Canada, from Tigray, from the US, from Europe. Even Rita Haftana is in, I think, Thailand or somewhere. So Canada, US, Tigray, all over Europe people are here. So it is a truly international conference, and we are so glad that you were able to make your Saturday I think, a meaningful Saturday because we are talking about something meaningful, peace and justice for Tigray and beyond. I think we talked about the path forward. The path forward is for us to come together, to work together, to achieve this mission of peace and justice in Tigray and beyond. I think with this message, I would like to thank again my colleagues, Ephraim Mesfin, you can see him right there, smiling with his glasses, who has been tirelessly working the technical issues and introductions. And my good friend, also Peter Hagos Gebra, is our secretary, who has been doing all this fantastic job. And the same thing with Archpriest Lida Kanat Muse, who has done also a tremendous job connecting us with so many influential people. We are sorry that one of our panels was not able to make it. We could have heard, his perspective from the regional politics, regional conflict resolution perspective. But that would be for next time. As we said, this is the first, not the last. So see you next time. Thank you so much again. Bye-bye. Have a nice Saturday and Sunday.
God bless all of you.
ታሪክ ባህሊ ጥበብ መንነት ክብርታት ትግራይን ትግራዋይነትን ኣብ ምዕቃብ